We'd like to thank Montecito Bank and Trust for their generous support in making Scam Squad possible.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Sound off.
3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Scam Squad.
Welcome to Scam Squad. I'm Patty Teal. So happy that you're joining us today. I'm here with Chief Investigator Christina Perkins, as usual, and she brought a very special guest, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Christina, would you introduce him, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you for having us, Patty. Today, our guest is Commander Bryan Millard from the Grover Beach Police Department. For those that are from the area, know that Grover Beach is a beautiful town in San Luis Obispo County. And so welcome, Commander Millard. We are very excited to have you here and to hear your story.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being invited to the show.
Of course. So, Patty, the way that Bryan and I first were introduced to each other is he had posted on LinkedIn that he is starting something called Silver Shield, and that piqued my interest. And so I reached out to him, and he shared with me what his hopes are in order to protect his community from scams and why he was involved. So Bryan, talk to me today, or tell our listeners why scams, specifically scams towards our elderly community, came on your radar.
Well, as I'm sure you've known for some time, scams are nothing new. And my entire career, the amount of cases that I've taken starting from very early in patrol have been too numerous to count. And it wasn't until I think this year and a very special case came to the forefront that I started asking, what more can we do? I'm tired of being reactive to these style cases because, unfortunately, scams are very hard to prosecute on the other end. It's very hard to find the people responsible. They're often from out of the area. And so it's our goal as a small community police department to be proactive, to try to think about what we can do. And so how this came to sort of my radar is I had done a talk at a church several months ago. In fact, I think it was even last year, to a group of widowers, in fact, and it was their group. They got together and they'd asked me to come speak on some various community topics, one of them being scams. It's a very timely issue for a lot of folks in the community. And so I gave a talk, and as always, when I give a talk, I say, here's my contact information if you ever have questions. And so I was sitting at my desk one morning and I received a call on my cell phone from one of the ladies that I gave a talk to. I'll refer to her as DL. And DL was distraught. She was in tears, very upset that she said, Bryan, I've been scammed. And so I listened to her story. And this wonderful lady lives in our community. And she got a phone call from someone claiming to be a federal authority who was concerned that her retirement income, that she was a retired teacher, by the way, and this person over the phone said that they were a member of a federal authority, that they were concerned that her retirement income and Social Security had been hacked, and they needed her to move her income out and secure it, in this case, into real gold coins. And unfortunately, over the next few hours of conversation on the phone, she proceeded to give access to her cell phone to this perpetrator online. So they saw her banking information. They were able to get everything else through an app. And then she actually withdrew $166,000 of her retirement income, put it into gold coins, and had a courier come to her house and actually retrieve it and disappear. We did not get any of this information until she called after the fact. So we were trying to track back, and even using a very sophisticated camera system, lots of technology, we were unable to get a resolution on this case, and she lost $166,000 in retirement.
Very sad. Yeah.
Extremely sad. And these kind of cases are altogether too common. But what really struck me, and just to add a little bit of a personal, connection, is that she's a retired teacher. Well, my mother is a retired teacher and is in the same age group. In fact, my mom and I have conversations about this kind of thing all the time. She calls me when she's concerned about a letter she receives or a phone call she gets. Bryan, is this legitimate? What does this look like? And often I have to say, yeah, that's a scam. Just throw it away, avoid it, delete it. And she's not online in a big capacity, but phone calls and other things still come through. And unfortunately, fortunately for her, she hasn't made any withdrawals or anything. I'm a trustee on her account now. But with this lady, DL, who has a son who's also a trustee on her account, I think about that son getting that phone call from DL and what that phone call would be like, and so it was very personal because I could certainly see my mother being in this circumstance. DL is not suffering from advanced dementia or Alzheimer's. She's a very intelligent, very smart lady who's lived a hardworking life, and these scam artists ripped her off for a significant portion of her retirement. So I got angry. I got really angry. And that night I went home and I sent my chief a very long email. He's used to receiving those by now for me, where I basically said, I'm tired of dealing with this from a reactive standpoint. So what can we do? What can we do as a department? What can we do as a community? And so Silver Shield was born. And it's a very early concept, and the name Silver Shield came out of the fact that we have silver alerts in the community for elders that are missing. And I thought, well, we could tie it in that way. It would make sense. And so the concept being, as a department, as a community, we're going to gather together a group of people, department people from inside the police department and also people outside the police department from the community who have different expertise. And we're going to brainstorm what we can do to get on the front end of scams. How can we intervene? How can we educate? How can we outreach and provide that protection to vulnerable seniors, certainly, but as I've discovered just through research, it's an age demographic that it has no age demographic. Certainly seniors are more vulnerable because they're often targeted. But this year I've seen as young as 20 years old be scammed through these applications or these online. So it's something that affects everyone. And so that was the impetus behind the group Silver Shield.
I just am so appreciative that you started that. It's such a great idea. And I'm glad that I was able to connect with you, because Patty and I talk about that a lot, is like, how do you protect people? And it really takes the entire community. It's not just law enforcement, it's the entire community that needs to be involved. Because as you said, it isn't just our elderly community that are most vulnerable. Anyone can be the victim of a scam. I think I say that every single Scam Squad episode, is it really is true. But the reality is the highest dollar amount and the most vulnerable when that loss happens is our elderly community, because it's hard to recover. So I just really am thankful that you're bringing this to your community, and eventually, San Luis Obispo County as a whole, and that we're partnering as a neighborhood county as well. What really do you think that was she at your talk, or did she hear about it when she called you?
This lady had been at my talk, and I think scams were one of several topics that I covered, and I've given several of those before, and it's usually, hey, this is what we're seeing. And by the way, if you ever experience anything that looks suspicious, give us a call, call us. We try to get ahead of that. And I think through the course of this sort of story and development, I've come up with this term, emotional hijacking. It's the best way I can term it, and I'm sure, given your experience in it, something's familiar, is that these scammers are able to break down those common sense defenses and get you into a situation where you feel scared, you feel vulnerable, you feel like if you don't make a quick decision, something's going to happen. You'll be arrested. You'll lose your electricity. You'll lose your funding in this case. And so they make these decisions without going through that normal check and balance process we all do, where we rationalize, like, wait, what is really going on? What's really being asked of me? And so, yeah, we wanted to get ahead of that. And where this is going is sort of an interesting process of development. We had our first Silver Shield meeting. We brought together department members, we brought together bankers, we brought together community sort of, people with connections. I brought in one of my youngest college kids who's a techie. I wanted all kinds of expertise in the room, and I wanted people that could think outside the box, because I said, our traditional methods aren't working. I've been taking these reports for 25 years. They've changed. They've gone from checks to online. They've gone from, these mail order scams, although those still exist, to more sophisticated, but the intent, the victimization is still there. So what we're going through now as a beginning committee is discussing what our overall goals would be and sort of some overall ideas. And so I'm actually staring at an office full of paper chart with a ton of information written on it. And then I have to distill that down and call the committee back for a goal setting meeting where we actually can develop some action plans of where to go next.
I think that's all such good information. And I think you hit it dead on when you say that emotional hijacking, right? Because the scams have been around forever, and you hear of scams, and people often, when I speak with them and they're repeating how they were scammed, they'll say, me saying this out loud sounds so ridiculous. And of course it's a scam, but at the time it felt so real, and they're frightened. So the victims, it hits them a certain way that they lose that ability to pause, think clearly, and think someone from the government wouldn't call me and have me convert my money to gold. But time and time again, you can't, as an outsider, say that wasn't the right reaction. It feels so real. And these scammers are so good at what they do that almost anyone, I've had doctors, teachers, nurses, every profession has been scammed. So it's definitely not an intelligence thing. It's that emotional hijacking, and you're so right about that.
Well, and I think to my own, past, and I even admit that, things like timeshares or other things like that uses the same technique to get you into a sale that you not necessarily would have done otherwise, right? And
yes.
And thankfully, we paused before, making that final, and maybe that's not necessarily a scam, but it's certainly the technique that sales use, is that they attach an emotion. And in the case of the timeshare, it was, vacation somewhere 2 weeks a year, all this amazing. But when you pause and you think through, well, wait, that means this and this amount and this much money. And then we're able to, my wife usually gets in the middle of it. She's more rational than I am. And so she says, well, that's not a good idea, Bryan. And then I stop, right?
Yeah.
And so this is just the taken to the extreme and I remember a call on patrol just a few years ago where I responded to a convenience store, and a gentleman, very upset, actually sweating profusely. The nervousness and what it was that this gentleman had been on the phone with someone claiming to be a member of the local sheriff's office, claiming to have arrest warrants out for him, and that if he didn't go to the local 7-Eleven and buy gift cards and post it to his account, that he would be arrested. And the only thing that saved him from doing more damage, he ended up losing some money in gift cards, but not all of it, was that his cell phone connection dropped in the middle of going to the last 7-Eleven, and he had time to pause. And so when I think about that, where do we get that pause? How do we get the pause to those seniors? And so I think that's part of where I want to take this program is through education and outreach, looking at how to get that intervention into the minds of seniors, into the hands of seniors, into their families' hands, where you can have some really good conversations and make sure that everyone in this community is armed with as much information. Ultimately, unless you remove all freedom from people's ability to maneuver their finances, you're never going to solve this completely, but you have to arm people with information, I think.
I really like that idea of time to pause, because we hit on the emotion a lot. And another thing that we haven't brought up is that unconventional payment method, right? That's a huge red flag. The gold bars, the gift cards, cryptocurrency, anything like that, is if you're being asked from anybody, to convert your money through some sort of unconventional way, that should be a red flag. But that time to pause is really the key, because you have those emotions, you need to be able to identify that emotion and stop. And that's something that we need to have everyone work on it together, family members, individuals, and outreach is the key. I think it's so important, because when I go out and I give my talks or appear on the news, I can't tell you how many, I'll get a flood of calls from victims regarding that specific scam. So there's not one easy way to combat this, but you're definitely on the right track. And I applaud you for that.
Thank you. I
Well,
really
me
hope
too.
that
Yeah.
really hope that we can do something with this. And I think it also gives people in the community some ownership over having impact into things that are going wrong. You know, if you don't have some personal story of being scammed in your family, you know someone that's been scammed. I guarantee you it's that pervasive, and most of us have, you know, at least received text messages that are fraudulent, and you know, been subject to those maybe debit card hacks where we all have to change our cards seems like every few years just because of it. So having this kind of program too, I think empowers the community to know they can do something and to help. And so that was sort of the goal behind it. It's not a police department effort, it's a community effort. And I'm interested to see like what other ideas will come out of this, because if we can stop one, if we can, I just had my analyst put together a quick spreadsheet. Since January of this year, we've lost over $380,000 in fraud. And that's, for a small community, a very significant amount. Two of those being high six-figure, you know, losses, but
Right.
that's a lot of money, and those are people's lives that have been impacted severely because of it.
And that's reported, right? We don't even have time to start talking about the shame that people feel or the embarrassment. And that's just the dollar amount whenever we quantify that's just the reported loss. Whereas there's a lot of people that don't report it because they're embarrassed by it. And so I encourage all the listeners, if you just, let's take the stigma and the shame away from being the victim of a scam. It is not your fault, and outreach and talking about it is so important. A couple episodes ago, Bryan, we had a victim of a romance scam. She was brave enough to come on and talk about it. She had lost, we didn't publicly amount, but she reported it as what, Patty, how did she say it?
She put it was enough to buy a house in
Enough to
most
buy a house.
communities.
In
Not in
some
Santa
communities.
Barbara, but in most communities, yes.
Yes. And so, and we know that has a lot of zeros in it. So it's really just back to the point of reported, right? It's such a big thing in our communities that people don't even have a grasp of how
Yeah.
much.
And what makes it all worthwhile, because sometimes it seems so insurmountable, is so often, you know, I've heard, and I'm sure Christina has heard, I would have fallen for this, but I heard this on Scam Squad. So I know you'll start hearing that a lot, that people will, you know, thank you, because if it were not for your warnings, they would have fallen for a particular scam.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on our episode today. I definitely want to have you back.
I would love to. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you so
course.
very much. I'm so glad we're partnering together. And I just want to tell our listeners that they can call the District Attorney's Office in Santa Barbara at 805-568-2442 if they need to talk to somebody, they feel they were scammed, or they'd like to tell their story of a scam or a near scam on Scam Squad. And you can also find us on YouTube and where you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for being our guest today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I definitely
Thank you.
appreciate your work on getting this information out to the community as well.
Thank you so much.